Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a lead fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. Once a week, I interview someone in this green movement somewhere in the world, and sometimes I bring on those that are entrepreneurs, those that might have an amazing, innovative product, and that's what we've got today. We've got Alisha with us. She's in Canada. I can't wait to talk about how she got into what she's doing as the CEO of Rainstick, but just want to unpack her story. So I'm really glad you're here today. Alisha, how you doing?
Hey, doing well. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, I know we got connected through some mutual green friends, and here we are. Just can't wait to have everybody listen to more about how you got into what you're doing. So if you would take us back, where did you grow up and where did you end up going to school and university?
Yeah, so I am originally from the west coast of Canada in a smallish city called Kelowna, which is actually in the Okanagan Valley, which happens to be Canada's only desert region. A lot of people, they don't realize, but yes, we have a desert, and that is, where I grew up. And so, yes, we have cacti. There's even, some scorpions that have been found in this region. And so, we really have all of the seasons, but we feel the effects of water. And so, growing up, that was always something that I noticed, and I was made to notice because of, some of the challenges that existed within my own community. But, in terms of school, I ended up going on. I went to a university here in Victoria, so in BC. That's where I went and got my international business. I majored in sustainability, but then I went on and studied through SOAS in the UK, and I studied climate change specifically. But it was kind of climate change and development. So understanding adaptation, understanding a little bit more about, what may need to happen in terms of where we need to go in order to ensure equality and really everybody is able to take advantage of some of the opportunities, but also lessen some of the impacts through mitigation and adaptation.
Sounds like early you knew you would do some of this mission-driven work and sustainability, but when did you first come across sustainability? Was it that program in college, or you just had that background growing up where you grew up? Like, where do you think that influence came from?
You know what? It's a good question. I think for me, I knew that I always wanted to do something that was mission-related. But early days, I worked actually in the tech industry, so completely different than what I'm doing now. I worked for Disney Interactive. And while I was there, I knew that I always really cared about social issues. I ended up getting more involved in some of their volunteer programming. And kind of during that time, I was tasked with finding some of the organizations that Disney was going to support. And throughout that, I started doing more and more research and really grew to some of the environment. And so, while I was there, I expressed that I wanted to do more, and I started to learn more at the same time. So, giving more presentations, and I was working at a tech company. But it wasn't until after that I was so motivated from some of my learnings. And, I grew up knowing water, but not necessarily thinking that I was passionate about the environment. It wasn't until I started learning about all of the challenges, and really I would say how everything is interconnected. And that really led me to pursue my master's in climate change. I ended up moving over. Actually, I lived in rural Kenya, focusing on water management, then went to Ecuador, looking at water management before I came back to North America, and said, really, everything is interconnected. We have water issues. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. Water, it's been the same for millions of years. We've always had the same amount of water, but where we need it, when we need it, at the quality, at the quantity, it's challenging. And in North America, our problem is despite the fact that we don't always have water or it's, being depleted, we use too much of it. And so there's a huge opportunity to do more with less. And that was kind of maybe this theory that I was trying to get into previously to really building out this crazy water startup.
Did you know at the time all that great work, moving around the world, learning and doing this work might lead to this? Did you always want to start a company one day, or what was going through your head at the time?
It's interesting because when I look back, I think I never said I'm going to start my own company, but I was always looking at ways to innovate in the companies that I worked with. And so, there was always opportunities where I'd either, open up a new program or I would do something because I would say there's a way better way that we can be doing this. And so, I think that when it came to Rainstick, I wasn't planning on coming up with this, very specific recirculating shower. But I asked myself, I said, if not me, then who and when? Because we need this technology. And so, that was really the impetus to jumping into it. And because, I really felt from like a world perspective, we needed this type of technology and we needed it now.
I love that. And sometimes when you can tell yourself who better to build that than us, right? It's that confident. Totally. And another thing I like to say is there can be intrapreneurship within a company. You might be in charge of a revenue stream or be innovative entrepreneur within a company. And then some choose to break out like you, like me, and be an entrepreneur, crazy entrepreneur. So I love this. I love this backstory. One or two more look backs, and then we'll get to present day. I like to ask my podcast guests, Alisha, about mentors. Was there, sometimes a mentor, someone you look up to, but you never meet, they influence you, and some it's someone that opened a door you meet with. Were there any mentors along the way?
Yeah, I think so. Very early days, I would say just the mentality and the thought around anything is possible, plan how to do it, but you could do anything you put your mind to. That was actually my mom. So it's, family mentor. And, through everything, I saw it. I saw her go back to school at a young age because, she wanted to go and get more education and become an accountant before she was a bookkeeper. So I saw the long hours that she put in. I saw that, I was involved actually in music when I was younger, and she really would, just the way that she would involve us and say, okay, where do you want to go with this? Let's build this out. Let's do more. I saw that she really cared about, now looking back, the environment, and everything that she did. Actually, her friends would call her Granola Girl. And now it's, because she cared a lot about people and the community around her. And so I think just being kind of influenced by that, but it wasn't, I would say my kind of like spark to do more specifically within the environment came from a lady, Nicole Rustad at Disney. When I was working with her, she was so incredibly passionate about not just social issues, but also the environment. It was actually her that said, Alisha, look into this, take some time, see some of the interconnections. And it was really through her that I began caring and began researching and began looking into it and seeing some of the, the challenges, but also the opportunities and ways to get involved.
Fantastic mentor there. Thank you for sharing. All right, so let's connect the dots on your entrepreneurial journey and bring us up to kind of present day. Anything else along the way that you were working on, and then tell us about your company.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mentioned that I came back to North America and I said, okay, our problem is that we use way too much water and there's a huge opportunity for growth. And it was at that time I ended up meeting Sean. He's now Rainstick's co-founder, and he came from an energy background, specifically energy conservation. And so he worked for Home Depot as their national energy manager. So working across their stores, looking for ways to reduce their energy consumption. Because, again, as we know, it often leads to the bottom line and being able to see those accrued savings year over year. He then worked for a large restaurant group, managing their energy conservation initiatives. So ended up meeting at Sean and really started to understand that water energy nexus. Typically, if you're using a lot of water, you're also using a lot of energy, and there's really some of that brainstorming where we started to say, okay, what does the residential home look like today? It's something that we can really identify with. It's definitely part of our whole water use, but it's also when we look at where water comes from or where water is used within the bathroom, 50% of that water actually happens in the bathroom. And, the largest energy intensive application is showering. It's also now one of the top water intensive applications. And so, I think that we've done a pretty good job in a lot of ways through some either subsidies or some regulations through cities to bring our water use down, but we can't really say the same thing for showering. I mean, the only real solution has been looking at regulated flow rate. So decreasing that, which compromises experience. We've looked at kind of chunky solutions like whole home gray water systems, but they're really expensive to deploy. They don't save the energy. They, typically require space. They require double plumbing, have a 15 to 20 year payback period. And so they can be more difficult to make that business sense to be able to integrate or be able to scale, across North America and beyond. And so we kind of looked at this and we said, okay, that's really where we started to say we need to get to the point of use as quickly as possible. So how do we become extremely efficient with the shower appliance? And that's really, we really started to, hone in on it. And when we look at point of use, we recognize the best water that you save is the water that you actually never used in the first place. And so, that's really where this interest in developing this technology we call Rainstick shower, that was now 4.5 years ago. That was lots of prototypes, lots of variations of the technology. But what we've been able to do is develop this pretty cool technology that is a shower appliance. So it doesn't require any double plumbing like a whole home gray water system. It actually saves the same amount as a whole home gray water system. Saves up to 80% water, 80% energy, while providing a really strong shower flow rate. So we actually push 3 gallons per minute out of the shower head, but we're only using 0.5 gallon per minute from the house supply. So it's through point of use recirculation and also water treatment in real time. So every drop from the shower is always hygienic, is always safe because of some of our treatment stages. So we're super excited about it. We're in Canada on the West Coast, but have been working more and more. We actually just went down to Cavus, where this technology won a Best of Cavus award, and we're getting into, thank you, getting into more and more projects.
I love this innovation. My background is LEED in green buildings, and I've taught many classes about instead of 2.5 gallon per minute, right? Over here, maybe 2.2. No, let's get down to, you're right, just reduction. And in your case, the net effect is, I think you said 0.5 gallon per minute, which is amazing. So I know we're going to put a link to your website. Everyone can see it, see this product. But tell us a little more about just building a company, especially in, call it CleanTech and, this green movement. Is it well received? There's a lot of things that are challenging, but how's it going? Where are you at? How can our listeners help?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think I always joke, oh man, I should have started working on a water bottle or something like that. It would have been much easier to explain and, go through, because this is brand new technology. And often folks have never heard of a recirculating shower. And so, I would say we go down to trade shows like Cavus, like others. We were at CES, and people come by and the first question they say is, what is that? And they say, okay, well, how does it work? And then they ask, okay, well, how does it actually clean the water? And, and then you kind of see the aha moment when they go through that piece of really understanding it. And I think, for me, I would love to get to a point where over the next 24 months, we're in a position where people know of the concept. They know what it is. And it's just a matter of choosing which one. I think we're seeing larger plumbing players really interested in the space and considering coming up either with their variation or their version. But it's a brand new technology. And so, in terms of ways to help, I think it's getting the word out that this technology exists. And number two is, yes, it can be installed. It's fully compliant. In our case, Rainstick is fully certified, UL, CSA, and meets hygienic requirements. So I think, tell your friends about it, talk about it, bring it up, and we're always happy to have a conversation and take you through the technology.
Well, we'll help with that. We have thousands of listeners every week, a lot of architects and construction professionals that have been listening for years. So, let's remind everyone one more time, something that you're right, a lot of people forget is you save energy too, right? We're pumping less water, we're heating less water with these efficient fixtures, and in your case, the recirculation. So I assume it's not using much energy at all to do that within Rainstick. So anything else about your company, the product? We'll put some links and really bring some awareness to you. Happy to do that. Anything else great. There for now?
Thank you.
So let's talk a little more about you, because I'd like to get to know you more. You're working on this product, you're working on this company, but what else in this green movement? That could be broad, it could be CleanTech. What else is kind of exciting that you're seeing out there at these conferences, or are you personally with all your climate work? What's coming at us in this green movement you're kind of reading up on?
Absolutely. I think we're seeing it's really exciting for the CleanTech, green tech, prop tech space. There's a lot of ways to put it, water tech. And, I think one of the fantastic parts of what I do is I am typically able to, meet with innovators and learn a little bit more about what's out there, what's coming, what's being invented. I think I'm personally interested, of course, in that water side. I think we've seen energy now for the last, 10 years really start to hit mainstream interest, I should say. And I feel like water is about 10 years behind of that energy conversation. What's exciting is when you bring in water and energy. This is what we do. It increases the payback period as well, or I should say decreases it, because the ROI is quite favorable. So when you start looking at these technologies, you can look at both. I think that's incredibly exciting when you can put that ROI to the water and energy. I think also looking at systems that take into account everything from start to finish. So I'm starting to see more atmospheric water generation, which I think is super cool. Putting that in with super efficient technologies, and then looking at, outdoor recycling mechanisms to be able to create a full system for the home. I'm seeing more and more folks that want to go off grid and don't necessarily want to stay on grid. And so coming up with technologies, both from energy, water, plumbing, thinking about everything holistically. And I think when you start to think about it from that perspective, then you really appreciate the systems that you have, but also, it's pretty exciting what sort of technologies are out there. And I think personally, I'm seeing just so much incredible efficiency with solar panels. We talk about solar panels in the last, 15, 20 years to where they are now. I'm personally building an off-grid cabin and, sort of looking at all of these full cycle systems to integrate. And so very, very exciting what sort of technologies we're able to now deploy.
Well, you just painted a very exciting future in this sustainability movement. I love all that. That was really cool. Thank you. Let's do some rapid fire questions to get to know you a little more, if that's okay. What would you say, Alisha, is your specialty or gift?
Probably with my team specifically, being okay with being wrong. And, and encouraging folks to speak up, share their opinions so that we can have a candid conversation and get to the right point. rather than just what I say.
Nice. Oh, thanks for sharing. That's good stuff. Do you have any good habits or routines, rituals that help you stay on point?
Every morning I get up and I write a to-do list and I think about the day. I look at my meeting schedule, what type of day I want to have. And I try to think about the priorities to really align on that. And since doing that, I've probably been doing it for the last year or so. It really helps with your productivity. And if I can add one other quick one is my team, we meet on a quarterly basis and we have milestones. And so we actually go through milestones that we want to accomplish every quarter. Every individual is tasked with milestones and we reflect on them quarter to quarter, and it just helps us get that much further ahead.
Very good, that visualization now. And now, I don't know if you're with your teams, meetings. There's a book called Death by Meeting by Patrick Lencioni. I've heard how Jeff Bezos runs meetings, but just I don't know, how do you do meetings within a fast-growing company like yours?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I definitely feel and I can appreciate the death by meetings. So one, we always tell the team if it can be said in an email very quickly, like what's the point? If you have a point, if you have a clear agenda and a timeline of how long that meeting needs to be, then it makes sense. If that meeting can be canceled, then cancel it. And then the other thing we say is also time the meetings. Like, for example, if you're in business development, but you're having admin meetings throughout the day, make sure that you communicate that to your team, that, your time for those type of meetings is in the afternoon for 2 hours when you're not meeting with clients or prospective clients. But I think, we've tried to do an active effort and, encourage our team. If you don't actually need to be in the meeting, then communicate that. And, I typically, that's part of my morning routine is I go through my meeting schedule and say, okay, what is really important to our objectives that we want to accomplish? Or am I currently in any meetings that I don't need to be part of? And make sure that I kind of go through that list and actually just say, either excuse myself or say, fill me in afterwards because, I'm going to be doing X, Y, and Z during this time.
Yeah, it's a permission and expectation thing, right? It sounds like a culture where it's like, hey, it's okay for you to opt out here and respect each other's time. So thank you for sharing those best practices. Just a few more questions here. Really enjoying this. So I'm a fan of a bucket list. Not everybody has a bucket list, but if there were a couple things on your bucket list, do you want to travel, do some adventure, you want to write a book? What's on the bucket list?
I think finish my cabin. When I bought this piece of land, it's almost 3 acres, beautiful lake, in the middle of nowhere. And part of it was I asked, I looked to see if there was Wi-Fi connection, network. And, there isn't. So I was like, okay, I'm in. That's great. That's what I'm looking for to get out. And so, part of my bucket list is to be able to get this cabin done, finished over the next 12 months, and then one that I have over the longer term is I really enjoy diving. Coral reefs, we're seeing the quality in a lot of areas are becoming less and less so. So I have a few immediate ones that I would go and travel to. And I'd love to, spend a few years and dive different locations.
That's a great bucket list and way to make your off-grid, off-internet cabin as sustainable as possible. Last year, my family, we discovered Belize. And as I understand it,
that's a great spot. Okay.
They have the second largest coral reef, right, to the Great Barrier Reef.
Absolutely.
Good diving there. I would highly recommend. Just a couple more things here. I like to ask my podcast guests, is there a book you'd recommend or a podcast or documentary, just a best practice? Hey, you got something out of this that you want to share with our listeners.
This is an older book, and I think there's now been a lot of iterations. There's been a lot of people building on this theory or concept, but if you haven't yet read it, I would recommend it. It is the book Starts With Why, I believe is what it's called. Yeah, that's right. Simon Sinek. And the idea is just, everything that you do, what's the why behind it? And you could take it into really micro tasks, or you can take it into, some of the milestones or objectives that you're building personally or for your business. We often say, why are we doing this? And if we don't have a good answer, then, you're able to kind of figure out what your priorities should be and if you should shift some things around. And maybe the other one I would recommend, and this is more so to deal with like workplace communication. And I think when you start either working with teammates or you start building your own team, it can be sometimes a little bit challenging from a communication perspective to make sure that people have what they need. They're, feel like it's an open environment where people can express some of the challenges that they face. And I found there was a book that I read recently. It's called Radical Candor. The author is, I believe it's Kim Scott. And I just thought it was a fresh take on communication. She really dives into the best way to communicate is, being forward, but doing so in a respectful way. And she goes throughout the book and there's a lot of examples and a lot of her, history of work environment, what she's learned, but I thought it was quite insightful. So I'd probably share those two books.
Awesome recommendations. I'll put links to those two books in our podcast show notes. Everybody, make sure you check those out. You're sharing a lot of wisdom here. Just two final things. As you look back on your career so far, any career advice you wish you'd have known earlier?
Listen to the trend. Not every single piece of feedback from everybody. And I think it's particularly important when you're starting a company. You're going to get feedback from everybody you talk to. And it can be, a little bit unnerving and you're going to want to, listen and then maybe try to pivot. But I would say if 10 people have told you the same thing, then you need to change. If you've heard a piece of feedback over here, but then you completely heard the opposite, then trust your gut.
That's some of the best wisdom I've heard in a while. I 1,000% agree. So thank you for sharing that. So let's say someone's listening to this podcast. They're loving your story and they're just now kind of getting into clean tech, prop tech, green buildings, if you will. Maybe they're making a career change or maybe they're a young professional going down this path. What words of encouragement do you have for them as we come to a close?
Our space that we work within the green space, prop tech, clean tech space is evolving. So it's an incredibly exciting space to be a part of, but it's also so new. So there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of unknowns. So, I would say if you're interested in being part of it is do your research and do your research often, listening to these type of podcasts, listening to podcasts that really look into, the science and some of the regulation and codes, because those are constantly being updated, is probably quite useful. But I would say don't give up because we need more and more folks that are passionate about this space to be involved.
Wow. What a fantastic interview. I hope everyone listening enjoyed this. Reach out, check out the website here, rainstickshower.com. Connect with Alisha on LinkedIn. Let her know what you thought of the interview. And thanks for sharing a lot of wisdom and your story and best of luck as you're building your company. This was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Charlie, for having me. It was fantastic meeting you and definitely keep in touch.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.